Kyle Harkema, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Chicago. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, we're going to be talking about your new book, Strategic Clarity, which comes out tomorrow. And I'm just super excited to talk about all things strategy with you, unpack your book a little bit, including the Strategic Orientation Index, which I think is super cool. And yeah, I mean, I think strategy is so important in this day and age. We need to be able to zoom out, think big picture, be able to try to look around the corner a little bit. The world is so messy, it's so complex, and it seems to only be getting more so. And so the clarity piece, I think, is also just so vital and so important. So I'm thrilled to have the chance to sit down and talk with you about your new book. As we get started, I wanted to share Kyle's bio with everybody. Dr. Kyle Harkema is distinguished scholar practitioner with a wealth of experience at the intersection of academia and industry, with an academic foundation built on rigorous study and research. Combined with extensive practical experience in the business world, Dr. Harkema epitomizes the modern scholar practitioner, a professional who not only understands theoretical frameworks, but also knows how to apply them in real world contexts. And let me just say, I love the scholar practitioner framing and approach. That's something I aspire to myself, as a professor and as a consultant. And, that's kind of the world that I try to swim in also. I think we need more of that. We need both informing the other, right? And so I appreciate your orientation. I appreciate your efforts. And welcome again to the conversation. Before we launch on in, anything you would like to share with the audience about your own background, your own kind of personal context, and then we'll start chatting about the book.
Yeah, I think John, you nailed it. And I just want to echo that. Yeah, I think we need more scholar practitioners to help bridge the divide between theory and practice. So love that we're swimming in the same lane.
Yeah, the bridging the divide, and also, I mean, there are so many books out there, right? There are so
Mhm.
many books on leadership, on strategy, on management, on all these different topics. And I mean, they all have their own place and they all have their own nuggets of wisdom and whatnot. Very few of them are particularly well grounded in like data and theory.
Yeah.
And so, they may be anecdotally, valuable, and they may, have their own kind of nuggets of wisdom, but I really, when I find one that is grounded in like good research,
Mhm.
grounded in good theoretical frameworks, I really appreciate it. That is also written in a way that's accessible to like the
Mhm.
general population, that's written in
Mhm.
an accessible way so that everyday business leaders can, use it to better their organizations. It's kind of a rarity, and that's what you're achieving with your book, and so I think that's a great feat.
Yeah, that was certainly the aim. Absolutely, and I agree with you. It's just a matter of applying that rigor and then making that rigor approachable, so that your practitioners will say, "Okay, that makes sense." They don't necessarily need to read the academic journals and understand all the theory, but I'm following and I can make my business better as a result. That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Well, one thing I always like to ask authors is why this book? Why now? Tons of books out there. Clearly, you have a strong background in the area. Um, but why now? Like, you probably could have written this before, perhaps you
Mhm.
could have done it later. Yeah, what was it about this, that just kind of pulled you towards it? Because these are a labor of love. They take a lot of time and energy, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, why now? That's a great question. And I think for me, it was really about taking all of the work. You know this, we share having gone through a doctoral process together. You spend years earning that degree and really deep in study and advancing new knowledge. And for me, having a foot in academia and a foot in practice, I felt like I wasn't bridging that divide as well as I could. And you spend so much time learning about a particular area, I really felt like the next step for me after a dissertation is how do I make that dissertation useful to the practitioner? Because for me, being a practitioner, there really wasn't a whole lot out there. And that is why I wrote it and why I wrote it now.
Yeah, well, that's great. And yeah, again, the bridge, the connection, translation of like rigorous academic work into the workplace, all of that I think is super important, super admirable. Um, in the book, again, title Strategic Clarity, you say that most business strategies fail. I don't think that's anything new, but you talk about how they fail silently. And that struck me. So, well, like, what do you mean by that? That they fail silently?
Yeah, thank you. So I think a lot of leaders think that strategy failure looks dramatic, right? Revenue collapse or layoffs, market share loss. But what I found over the course of my leadership career, as well as my research journey, is that strategy failure usually is much quieter than that. It starts with subtle execution friction, and departments start drifting apart in how they interpret priorities. Initiatives may lose momentum, or decisions get relitigated, and leaders get frustrated because they feel like they're saying the same thing over and over again. And an example, I think a lot of executives listening will recognize this feeling. You leave for an offsite or a leadership meeting, and everybody's aligned. Everybody agrees. The direction is clear, the energy is high. Fast forward 3 months later, it feels like different parts of the organization are moving in completely different directions. Marketing is moving one way, operations another, sales is frustrated, and then leadership is stuck asking, why are we struggling to gain traction when the strategy seems so obvious, the energy was so high? And what I found is the issue is not necessarily the strategy itself. The issue is that the organization is no longer behaviorally aligned behind it. So, why I say strategy often dies silently or dies in behavior is because that behavioral drift happens long before the financial consequences fully show up in the organization.
Yeah. So like, how do you start to like thwart that? Like, if you're aware that strategies tend to fail silently,
Mhm.
um, I guess awareness is the first step.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so that then what? Like what's the next thing that you start to try to do so that you don't fall prey to that same kind of common issue?
Sure. So I think one thing I would say is by assuming that alignment is not equal to agreement. So a lot of times leaders will leave a meeting and everyone feels that the direction is solidified, nobody objected, we're all good. And what actually happens then is different departments take and interpret that strategy through their own functional lenses. And over time, the strategy diverge behaviorally. And because that drift happens gradually, organizations really normalize it until execution, they don't normalize it until it becomes noticeably difficult, right? And there's a pain point that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Mhm.
so I think you've talked about some of those warning signs,
Mhm.
strategies breaking down inside the organization. Perhaps this leads to something I teased in the introduction. So you
Mhm.
have in the book, you have something called the Strategic Orientation Index or the SOI. Um, and perhaps this is a tool I think that organizations can use, leaders can use that can be helpful to spot,
Yep.
these silent strategic failures.
Mhm.
talk us through this a little bit. Like
Yeah,
what is it? How can it help leaders see the types of things they're usually missing?
absolutely. Yeah. So SOI helps leaders see the behavioral system that's undergirding their execution. And what I found is most organizations are really good at measuring outcomes, right? Revenue, profitability, customer retention, so on and so forth. But they're rarely measuring whether teams are aligned in how they're thinking, how they're listening to the market, how they're acting operationally. And SOI was designed to make those patterns visible. And something interesting that I want to clarify at the outset, because it's important, the point is not to tell the people how to do their jobs. We're not telling engineers how to engineer or salespeople how to sell. The question is higher than that. Are the functions reinforcing the same strategic posture? And let me give you an example. Let's say an organization realizes it wants to move toward what I call fearless inventor posture, which is being more entrepreneurially oriented. The issue may be that the company is moving too slowly. Too many decisions require too many approvals. So people may technically have authority, but behaviorally, they're still waiting for permission before acting. So in that case, the work is not telling the teams exactly what decision to make. It's clarifying decision posture. So more asking, where do we need faster experimentation organizationally? Where do we have too many handoffs? Where do we have unclear ownership? And where organizationally do we need tolerance for calculated risk? So that creates coherence, not micromanagement. So leadership is not saying, here's how to do your job. Leadership is saying, here's the kind of strategic behavior that this moment, that this context requires of us organizationally. So that's what SOI does, is it makes those inconsistencies in your organization visible before they become a major execution problem.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think a little bit more about, so you have inconsistencies
Hmm.
um that I mean every organization has them, right?
Hmm.
Every team has them. So leaders are always grappling with trying to create a consistent culture, trying to create systems that um, allow for people to perform at peak levels
Hmm.
within a safe environment. They're always trying to create a place where you know you can achieve the KPIs, the desired outcomes, but
Hmm.
you have policies, practices, and procedures that sometimes get in the way. We're humans, so you have human foibles and human issues that get in the way.
Hmm.
You have all these different inconsistencies and all these different things that just like are gums in the works, right? That get in the
Hmm.
way,
Hmm.
that cause these types of issues. And
Hmm.
so, give us some like elements of the strategic orientation index, like that you're measuring, that to help us think through like what are the types of things that you're systematizing, uh, because I think we all know that they're there,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of leaders spend a good chunk of their time each and every day putting out fires, trying to deal with them, right?
Hmm.
Um, and maybe it sounds almost unbelievable to people to think, oh, I could actually proactively like deal with these before they become major problems. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, absolutely. And, John, the thing that you said, which is interesting, is culture, right? I've heard that a lot. And SOI is a little bit different than culture.
Sure.
Culture is part of the environment, right? But SOI really is specifically focused around strategic behavior. right? Or as I call them, the orientations. So culture, in my mind, describes values and norms more broadly within the organization, but SOI is measuring specific things to your question. How do organizations think about opportunity and risk? How are organizations listening to their customers and to their markets? And how consistently are the organizations executing decisions under pressure, right? So in many ways, culture is the overarching environment, and SOI is measuring the execution patterns
Mm.
that are happening within the organization.
Okay, so the execution piece specifically.
Hmm.
Um, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that you have seen,
Hmm.
as you've used the SOI within
Yeah.
organizations. Like what, I'm sure there are things that you were expecting to see, but there's probably
Hmm.
things that you were surprised by
Yeah,
as you started to
absolutely.
measure.
Hmm.
Because as you've used it across a range of types of organizations, different industries, etc.
Yeah, yeah, I love that question. So, for me, what surprised me is how often leadership teams believe that alignment existed because the strategy had been communicated clearly.
Yeah.
And honestly, I get it. I understand why. I've been a part of these leadership teams. We spend exorbitant amounts of time building strategic plans, running the offsites, communicating the priorities to the organization, and aligning. But once we start measuring the behavior across the organization, we found that different departments and different layers of leadership are interpreting the strategy very differently. So, some teams view the organization as highly innovative, while some are viewing it as risk averse. Some are viewing it as customer oriented, while others are viewing it as really internally focused. So I think what surprised me is how much leadership didn't understand the interpretation that's happening as it goes across departments and as it goes down to middle management and to frontline. There's what leadership says, but then there's what middle management hears, and then there's what frontline employees operationalize. And those are often not identical. The communication is happening, but alignment isn't. And that's really the distinction and one of the foundational insights of the book is how do we bubble up these orientations so that they're visible? And once they're visible, we can create systems to make sure that we're aligning to the type of orientation that we believe our industry context demands of the organization.
Yeah. Any other like it's so fascinating to me because
Yeah,
every organization is so unique. Like
sure.
as I've worked as a consultant with different organizations, um, there's always the temptation. When you see it doesn't matter how similar an organization may seem. It could be the same industry, it could be relatively the same size, same kind of general stage
Mhm.
of growth development, same general kind of niche. Like there you could check so many boxes of how this organization is so similar to other
Mhm.
organizations you've worked with in the past. But every organization is different, right? Every
Sure.
organization has its own unique context, its own unique history, its own unique people. And so every organization is unique. And that sounds obvious, but I can't tell you how many times, I have to relearn that lesson over and over, and how many times I think other consultants have to relearn that over and over. And so as you're going into organizations, not only, seemingly probably similar organizations, but vastly different organizations, um, like maybe, additional like types of like just dramatic
Hmm.
like differences that you see
Yeah.
as you're applying this
Hmm.
kind of an approach to like the implementation of strategy
Yeah.
and the challenges that organizations are facing.
Well, I love that you drew that out, John, because that's one of the things that when people are engaging with my framework and with my work, they're asking themselves well, is there a best quadrant, right? Or should we all try to be upper right, which would be visionary vanguard, which means high in both entrepreneurial orientation and market orientation? Sure, you could say that, but ultimately there's industry fit conditions. And
Yeah.
that's where when we say, do you want, different levels of market or entrepreneurial orientation, what is your industry? What is your organizational culture? Who are your employees? Do you have a lot of people who tend to be more entrepreneurial or less? On your staff. So there definitely needs to be not only an industry fit, but also an organizational fit with the posture that you're trying to drive toward. So I love that you're drawing that out because that's very much what we need to discuss when I'm working with organizations in terms of, okay, what is our ideal posture? Because it's not what is the ideal posture. It is what is our ideal posture. And that's a
Yeah.
very different question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so much to think about here. I think it's so fascinating to me, the world of strategy, the world
Mhm.
of complex organizations, just and how we're navigating in within so much complexity, so much disruption,
Mhm.
so much ambiguity.
Mhm.
Um, we've only scratched the surface here, but thankfully you have a wonderful book that people can get and start to dig through and to unpack more and more of this. I note the time. I need to let you go and get on with your busy day. But before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word for today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And you can find me at kylejharkema.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. I regularly share insights about strategy, execution, organizational alignment, and the behavioral side of leadership. And if you're a leader listening to this podcast and you feel like your execution has become more difficult than it should be inside your organization, there's information on my website for you to learn from and reach out to me. And I think for a closing thought, I really want leaders listening to this to rethink where your strategy actually lives. We build it in decks, in plans, and in offsites. But ultimately, our strategy needs to live in the behavior of everyone in our organization and how we think about opportunity and risk, about our customer and markets, and how we execute under pressure. Because how we're behaving is how our strategy comes to life.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. This has just been a real pleasure, Kyle. I appreciate all of your thoughts. I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Kyle can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.